Hello and welcome back in, everybody. Today I got another deck tech here from Wilds of Eldraine. This one is for Hylda of the Icy Crown. It's 2, a white and a blue for a 3/4 human warlock, and it says whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you may pay 1. When you do, choose 1. So you can either create a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, including your Hylda, so commander damage is viable here, or scry 2, then draw a card. So I mean, this deck pretty much builds itself. It's not super unique in what it's doing, but it is very, very strong. I have a feeling this deck can be absolutely brutal to play against. You know, you're keeping your opponent's creatures tapped all the time, so they're not going to be able to attack you. You're creating tons and tons of 4/4 elementals, and you can buff them up with your commander. You can draw from your commander. So this is super versatile, especially for only 4 mana. This is actually an insanely strong commander. So first off, obviously the thing you're going to want to do first is tap your opponent's creatures. So we have some ways to do that. I have some different categories for it. The first one is like the one-offs. So you'll be able to tap 1 or 2 or however many creatures per turn, or in smaller increments as opposed to some of the tap all creatures your opponents control. First one we got here is Elvish Mariner. It's 2 and a blue for a 3/2 elf pilot. It says whenever Elvish Mariner attacks, scry 1, and whenever you scry, tap up to X target non-land permanents, where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. So this, with your commander's ability, obviously you have scrying on your commander, so you're always going to have access to it. And so whenever you pay the 1 to scry 2, then draw a card, you're also going to be tapping down 2 of your opponent's creatures, which just means you're basically going to be spending all your mana whenever you really need to with this guy. Another one here, we got Lossarnock Captain, 3 and a white for a 3/1 human soldier with first strike. It says whenever Lossarnock Captain or another human enters the battlefield under your control, tap target creature and opponent controls, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So there is a fair amount of humans in the deck on its own, but just on that upkeep that we get the one soldier that comes in and then we tap target creature, you know, that incremental value is also pretty good. So I like this one that it just accrues the value over time, as opposed to some of the one-shot spells we have here that tap down all of your opponent's creatures, such as Subjugator Angel, 4 white for a 4/3 angel with flying, and it says when Subjugator Angel enters the battlefield, tap all creatures your opponents control. So we have several in the deck that are pretty much similar to this. Either tap all creatures your opponents control, tap all creatures target player controls. So if we have a lot of mana up available, we're going to be able to use our commander's ability multiple times a turn. So that is pretty strong. Another one here, we got Regna's Sanction, 3 and a white for a sorcery. It says for each player, choose friend or foe. Each friend puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control, so pretty much only you. And each foe chooses 1 untapped creature they control, then taps the rest. So your opponents get to keep probably, you know, their commander or their big blocker up, but they have to tap down the rest of their creatures, which is exactly what we want to be doing. So those are just a few examples of some of the tapping down effects I have in the deck. So obviously our win con here is going to be with those 4/4 white and blue elemental creatures. And a great way that we can speed up the process of killing our opponents with those is with some buffs, such as Prava of the Steel Legion. It's 2 and a white for a 1/4 cat soldier. As long as it's your turn, creature tokens you control get +1/+4. You can also pay 3 and a white to create a 1/1 soldier creature token, which you're never going to use. So basically on your turn, that turns your base level elementals into 5/8s. Those are some beefy elementals. Obviously you're not going to be able to block with them with that 8 toughness, but on your turn, having 5/8s that you'd be able to swing into your opponents, that's pretty scary, not gonna lie. Another one here, we got Intangible Virtue, 1 and a white for an enchantment. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. So not all of the tapping effects keep your opponent's creatures, you know, tapped down until their next turn or 2 turns after or anything. Sometimes they just tap them and that's it. So you're gonna need to leave some of your creatures up as blockers. So Intangible Virtue will be able to keep our 4/4s up as blockers because it gives them vigilance. Another one I got here, Citadel Siege, is kind of a perfect fit in this deck. 2 white for an enchantment. It says as Citadel Siege enters the battlefield, choose Cons or Dragons. Cons says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, or you can choose Dragons, which says at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, tap target creature that player controls. So it depends how late you are in the game when you draw this card. If it's early, I'd probably go with Dragons. If it's a little later and you already have a board, you probably want to do Cons. That way you can start buffing up your board to go for the kill, you know? Then obviously with a creature heavy strategy, we're going to need some protection to make sure our board board doesn't get absolutely demolished. So first up for the protection, we got Pation Accord, 3 white blue for an enchantment. It says whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, put a shield counter on Pation Accord. Also, you can remove a shield counter from Pation Accord at instant speed to prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to you this turn. So, you know, your opponents have 10 creatures total out, you tap all of them down, you put 10 shield counters on this, and then you can prevent the next 10 damage that is dealt to you. This is a really, really strong Pillow Fort ability for yourself. However, we do have some protection for our board here with Selfless Spirits, one of the options, 1 and a white for a 2/1 Spirit Cleric. With flying, it says sacrifice Selfless Spirit. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So this one, you just set it on the field and hopefully it deters your opponents from using their board wipes or targeted removal or anything like that. Another one, similarly, we got Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, white and a blue for a 2/2 halfling soldier, has vigilance and ward 1. Also has tap. Another target creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until end of turn. So this is great protection for either your commander or a certain creature on your board that your opponents are going to remove. Kind of just a deterrent from even trying to target your stuff in the first place, so this card is pretty good. And last but not least here, I got the card draw in the deck. Obviously, we do have card draw on our commander, so we don't have to worry about it too much, but there is so much synergy with tapping your opponent's creatures and drawing cards, such as borrowing 100,000 arrows. It's 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Draw a card for each tapped creature target opponent controls. There's a few spells in the deck like that. Another one we got here, Distant Melody, 3 and a white for a sorcery. Choose a creature type, draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. So since we're having a bunch of 4/4 blue elementals, once we have enough on the field, we can cast our Distant Melody and refill our hand. Another one that's going to get us incremental value is Charade of Numbing Depths. It's another new one from Wilds of Eldraine, 2 white blue for a 2/3 Merfolk Wizard. It says when Charade of Numbing Depths enters the battlefield, tap target creature and opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. Those stun counters mean if it would go to untap, you remove the stun counter and it stays tapped. Also, it says whenever you tap 1 or more untapped creatures your opponent's control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, so every single turn we're going to be drawing an extra card off of this guy as long as we're tapping down some of our opponent's creatures, which is likely to happen. Another one very similar to that one, Verity Circle, 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. Also pay 4 and a blue to tap target creature without flying, so that activated ability we're never going to use, but since we're using all of these tapping effects, this is going to be going off like crazy, as opposed to Charade, who's only once per turn. Verity Circles every single time that you tap down a creature your opponent controls. And last but not least, I thought this was an interesting one in this deck just because we have that scry 2 then draw a card on our commander, so this will take advantage of that. We got Elgath Crossroads Augur, 4 blue for a 5/6 Sphinx with flying. It says if you would scry a number of cards, draw that many cards instead. So with your commander and Elgath out, you pay 1 whenever you tap down an opponent's creature to draw 3 cards. That's actually insane. This should be in every single Hylda deck because you're going to be using that scry 2 draw card pretty often. I actually had an Elgath deck at one point and you draw so many cards with this guy, so definitely throw him in your Hylda deck. And that's pretty much all I got for this one here today. Hylda seems like an incredibly strong commander. I definitely think she'll be seeing some play in the format. How much, I don't really know. It's a little bland, you know, you're just tapping down things. We've already seen that in Rhoda and Timon, so we do have commanders that are already like that. However, I think those decks might just want to swap out Hylda for those commanders because she is very strong. If you wanted to do more of a +1/+1 counter theme with that middle ability on her, you probably could try to add some cards in there that will help benefit off of that, but I just figured your spaces are pretty much taken up by all your tapping effects and then buffing up your elementals to go in for the win. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to check out the full deck list, I have it down in the description. Go ahead and subscribe down below if you'd like to see more of my content, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, take care.